I love having a wood stove in the barn, and since March, right, or February, I've been using it to heat the space, and it's kind of fun for starters. And if you have a woodworking hobby, there's always crap to burn. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Rob Watsack, Digital Brand Manager.
Hey, Patrick.
Brian Pontalillo, FHB Editor.
Hey, Patrick.
And our fearless producer, Jeff Rose.
Hello, folks.
You please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Oh my God, Rob, so you put a bunch of photos up on our Slack message board last night showing how your house is completely torn apart. How is the family tolerating this?
You're exaggerating.
Am I exaggerating, Brian?
If that's an exaggeration, I saw those photos.
It's only a little hole.
Oh my God! Tell people first of all what's going on there, and then how the family is dealing with it.
Well, so I seem to be. It usually seems to be like right after dinner when we're just sort of chatting about ideas, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to tear another hole in the wall." No, so you saw my window go in. I haven't touched the window, but I did tear off all of the siding on that whole back section of the house because, one, I want to continue insulating that entire wall with rock wool, and they go with sheathing and WRC.
I will offer that's the reason it looks so bad. Is because your house doesn't have sheathing, so when you take all the siding off, all the framing and wiring is all exposed. It just looks like a mess.
Yeah. And the thing is, you gotta remember too. It's like this house didn't come with wiring. This house, everything was added later because it's from the 1870s. And some of the stuff was apparently added after they even finished rooms, even down the road, because they obviously drilled holes in the outside of the house to snake wires up through the wall. It's a good thing I wasn't just nailing new siding over the old siding, because there were a whole bunch of wires pressed right up against the clapboards, and just from people snaking them through the walls. And I mean, that's a concern anytime you're remodeling a house, is you
especially
don't know.
Kitchens, right? Because kitchens have had at least one major remodel, right, in their history, and that's when people added circuitry, right, and often badly.
Yeah. So I've said before that this is one of the least comfortable rooms in my house in the winter time, and I know that it's leaky, and I know that a lot of it comes from under the cabinets. But then I pulled the range hood out because we're putting an over the range microwave combo range hood kind of deal, and the upper cabinets were not high enough to fit something like that. So I was doing some surgery on the cabinets last night, and I pulled the old range hood off the wall, one of those cheap ones that's set to recirculate instead of exhaust, and they snaked the wire through the outside wall, drilled a hole through a stud, put the wire in, and then realized they were in the wrong bay. So then when they went to go install the range hood, they just kind of chiseled a big chunk out of the wall between the two stud bays and ran the wire in the space that the sheetrock took up right behind the range hood, and then kind of got it into the hood. So that I went down there this morning to make a cup of coffee, and I had my infrared thermometer, of course, and I was checking out the temperature.
Of course, right? Because everyone carries it around.
You got to know if the coffee's hot.
So, the window was the same temperature as the wall, which was kind of nice. I mean, the wall's not super insulated yet, so I was just nice that the window was a lot warmer than the outside with my new double pane window there. But then I pointed the infrared thermometer at the wall where the range hood used to be, and that hole in the wall was just pouring 45-degree air into my kitchen. So
it's going to make a huge difference, man.
Yeah. But so
you were extolling the virtues of your oscillating multi-tool in some of those photos because you cut that cabinet down that was above the range hood in place. You left it there and surgically removed the bottom and the face and cut the face frame shorter, right?
Yes, and I did it so neatly that I was able to basically knock the side rails off of the bottom rail of the cabinet after I cut a section of it out and just gently slip it back into the position that it's going to go up above. And you just can't do that with any other kind of saw.
It's a really amazing tool.
Amazing.
You know, I didn't have one for a while. And then, you know, as soon as I got my hands on one, it was like I found a use for it every day that I was working on my house. It's like it's just such a wonderful tool. And what's so interesting about it is how that you can be so precise.
Yeah. I'm going to tell everyone, if you don't have one of these things and you're doing any remodeling, buy one.
Yeah,
and it can be the cheap one from Harbor Freight if you don't think you're going to use it a lot. I see tons of those on job sites, and they seem to hold up pretty well and do the job. It's not going to have the precision as the better ones, but just get one of those things.
But I'll tell you what. So I bought one of the ones because nowadays you can buy the cordless tools without the battery if you already have a battery kit. And I had a DeWalt drill, so I went out and bought for like $130, $120 the DeWalt one, and it's so nice to have that thing as a cordless tool because it's the kind of thing where like you're stuck in a situation and you just need to get in there quick and cut something out of the way. You just go grab that thing and you go. But the first time I ever used one was I used to work for help some cabinet makers out, and we had to inset a cabinet into some existing baseboard, and you just hold up a block of wood on the line that you need to cut. And so that's the key. If you want to make precision cuts, you got to have a guide. So you screw or clamp or even just hold a block of straight wood up against where you're going to make your cut. And that holds the blade nice and tight to the line, and you can get it perfect every time.
And we've mentioned it before on the show, but we have a great article by Kevin Ireton on ways to use this tool that you might not have thought about. So we'll link that on the podcast page because there are some things to know about it, and it'll get you out of a jam many times. Brian, what have you been doing in Charleston? I bet the weather is lovely there this time of year.
Yeah, the weather's lovely. That's it. A lot of time on the beach. And
so do you just lay there, or do you go surfing?
No, I don't lay on the beach at all. Going to the beach for us. Amy likes to go to the beach sometimes, but for us, going to the beach means going to the beach, taking a walk, taking a dip in the water, and then we're out of there. So we usually go to the beach for like an hour at the end of the day or early in the morning.
What is the water temperature in Charleston in the summertime?
It's like I don't know what it is, but it's like a bath. It really is. I went for a walk this weekend on the beach on a cool morning, and the water was warmer than the air. So.
That's my idea of going to the beach.
Yeah.
Going to the beach in New England is not very fun for me.
Yeah.
Jeff, what have you been doing?
I've been working outside a lot more, so clearing some standing dead wood and clearing more brush and
trying to hurt your back?
Your back is fine. Legs are tired, but hands are tired.
I've been doing a lot of car repairs lately, and Rob's going to tell me it's because of my gravel driveway, which he tells me almost daily. But I've had to put a new exhaust system on the truck, and then that was sitting in the driveway because it was too loud to drive, really. It would have probably gotten me pulled over. So I was using my wife's car, and then the check engine light came on, and that fixed them both over the weekend. But the fleet is getting kind of old, guys, and I'm getting kind of tired of working on cars. It's not exactly my favorite thing to do, especially when I don't have a concrete floor or a lift. I'm doing this out in the grass, which is kind of fun, but not in the wintertime.
So you got anything on your wish list? Next truck, maybe?
I'm going to ask the readers to submit their used car deals to the FHB podcast email, and I'm going to try and get a new used car.
Sounds good.
Patrick, based on your skill set, maybe you need to build a garage.
I would, Brian, but I don't think the town's going to let me put any more buildings on this property.
You're out of space?
I'm out of space. Although I think I've convinced Carol that we need a carport with a concrete slab under it, and maybe the slab could come later. And I think maybe she could convince the town that if we put a rain garden in to deal with the roof water, we might get away with that. But I don't think it's a given.
Yeah, honestly.
You could definitely write an article or have someone write an article for us about how to design an attractive carport.
Yeah.
Because in my experience, they're hideous. Except on a few mid-century modern homes in California where they're really cool. Otherwise, they're hideous.
Yeah. And so I have a kind of vernacular shaped building. And, it's reasonable that a farmer, at the turn of the century would have kept adding on to his barn, right? As he got more equipment and more animals or whatever. So I think the form could tolerate it. But yeah, you're right. If you just have a roof over your cars, it's kind of hideous.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. You have the kind of building where you just do a simple shed roof and some posts, and it looks like it's just where they park the tractors.
And I might have to get some tractors, Rob, too, to put under there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So in episode 267, we asked for listeners about feedback about Aeroseal, which you guys know is the process where they spray the sealant into ductwork to improve its airtightness and performance. And so we heard from Zachary, who lives in Edgewater, Maryland. And he says, you asked for feedback about the Aeroseal process. Our house has 2 heat pumps, one for the downstairs and one for the 2nd and 3rd floors. The upstairs unit is sized correctly, but always struggled with maintaining the set point. In the winter, when it gets below 40 degrees, it has to run the electric resistant heats pretty much nonstop just to keep the temperature around 68 degrees. The result is extremely high electric bills. I spent last summer air sealing and insulating the knee walls, but it did little in the winter, leading me to believe it was a problem with the ducts, which are run completely into unfinished spaces. An Aeroseal dealer came out as part of the state's energy audit program, and they did at first a blower test, door test on the ductwork to see if it was truly leaky. Well, the ducts couldn't even be pressurized to 20 pascals and only got to 15, which led us to believe that there was a break somewhere in the line. I spent the next month crawling through the insulation trying to find the break, but to no avail. But I noticed that even in a full Tyvek suit in the attic in the summer, I was nice and cool because the ductwork had bad leaks everywhere. We went ahead with the Aeroseal process, which took about a day, and it was extremely painless. I noticed immediate results. We went from 210 CFM of leakage to just 32. We have an ecobee thermostat with individual room sensors and have it programmed to keep our daughter's room at 72 degrees at night. The system would run for so long to get her room at 72 degrees that it kept the rest of the rooms relatively comfortable. On the first night after aerosealing, her room went from 78 degrees to 72 in less than an hour, and the rest of the rooms climbed to 80 degrees because the heat pump barely ran. We solved that by reprogramming our thermostat. Now the unit runs for a fraction of the time to keep all rooms comfortable, and I'm looking forward to seeing the gains this winter. The total cost for Aeroseal was about $2,500, with the state paying $750 through an energy rebate. I'm looking at about a 1 to 1.5 year return on my investment, which I'm quite happy with, and more importantly, our home is now comfortable. After this experience, I would absolutely say go for it, especially if your state offers any rebates at all. It also helped that they test the ductwork beforehand to see if it can help. If it can't, you pay just a little bit for the testing. Thanks for the amazing podcast. Zachary, thank you very much for that amazing feedback. That's wonderful.
I really want to hear back from him. I hope he emails back in after he gets some, sees how it works through the winter, because that you got to think about that. It's very little material. I mean, granted, it's a pricey job, but it's a pretty environmentally friendly improvement to your house.
Oh my gosh. And 1 or 1.5 year payback for an energy improvement is nothing. That is absolutely nothing. People will have paybacks on windows and stuff that are decades. What do you think, Brian? Have you heard about this successfully used before?
I have. Yeah, I didn't. I have heard about it used successfully. And I know that, it's a great retrofit product, and I even know that some installers are using it in new construction to seal the ducts, which you don't need
because it's faster, right?
Because it's faster, and because it can be tested immediately. I mean, I guess using mastic can be tested immediately as well, but I think the process is just fast and straightforward. But I think the lesson is seal your ducts.
Right.
Because it's still not something that's done commonly enough.
Right.
And although it's written into the international residential codes, that's not necessarily enforced everywhere. And it alone is just a huge energy improvement. Sealing your ducts, it should be standard practice.
Can you imagine how many houses there must be out there that if people just sort of went from door to door and did this, how much energy we would be saving right now?
Yeah, it's pretty huge, I think.
No one's touching my ducks.
So, Patrick, I have to say something. I had this funny picture in my head. He said, I spent a month crawling around the attic looking for leaks, and I just pictured him like locked up in there for a month just crawling around.
It keeps coming to the attic hatch. Can I come out now? This comes from Ethan. I listened with interest to your recent discussion of DIY blower door fans. For a recent build, I constructed an apparatus to host an exhaust fan in a 3x3 window opening. It was instrumental in getting the final blower door result to 0.2 air changes at 50 pascals, which I've been told was one of the tightest in the region at the time. I got to think that's a typo, right, guys? Doesn't he mean 2.0? 0.2 is crazy. Passive house is 0.6.
Yeah,
what do you think, Brian?
It's crazy tight. I mean, people have hit those kinds of numbers, but yeah.
He says, it was nice to have a fan mounted in a fixed location that I could find holes in the envelope at different phases of the project, before installation, after installation, etc. I wasn't using this to test air tightness, just to find holes. I used this in conjunction with a FLIR heat detecting camera that I hooked up to an old Android phone. I found lots of small leaks through staples and other fasteners. I think the real value came in finding some major holes at membrane corners, transitions, etc. I was also incidentally able to find entire stud bays that had been inadvertently missed by the insulation installers. I highly recommend the FLIR camera and also some type of exhaust fan for depressurization that can be used day in and day out to find leaks. It's a great hobby for homeowners, architects, and contractors who have nothing else to do on cold, lonely nights.
I have a question. How does an insulation contractor miss a whole stud bay?
That's their job. Right?
Well, I'll tell you, when I stripped the back wall of my house, they drilled holes to blow insulation in, and you could see where they were drilling around. And I've got corner braces in my house, so there was a hole into one of the corner braces, and they obviously realized they were in the wrong spot and moved it down. But yeah, a whole stud bay, I could see behind a single stud in a corner or something like that. But
what he's speaking to, though, is really worth mentioning, is that blower door directed air sealing is
everything.
Is everything. I mean, it really can help you, find exactly what needs to be done. And if you do it at the right time during a build or during a remodel, it's an invaluable approach.
I don't know that there is a right time. I think you do it all the time or several times, right?
Well, Brian? That's right. I mean, I guess what I'm alluding to there is before you have, put up drywall and can't get at those leaks anymore.
Amen.
Well, people who haven't done it might not know when the right time is.
I've had blower doors in my house a few times, and I don't own one, so I was like, I got to take advantage of this and do as much air sealing as I can while this thing is running. But if you have a fan like this, you can do it at a much more relaxed pace, and you could say, hey, I just had an electrician or a plumber come in, and there's some new penetrations in the house, so I can find out if any of those are leaky. So.
Ethan goes on to say, the only downside is I now have this clunky fan sitting around. If I could do it again, I would probably build it smaller, or maybe using a design that wasn't to fit a specific window on this particular project. Surprisingly, my local building inspector did in the end ask for a blower door test result. I don't want to be presumptuous, but given our stellar results and his lack of enthusiasm, my guess is he either didn't look at the results or didn't know what he was looking at when he did. That being said, I guess the fact that he asked for the results is a sign of some sort of progress. Wow, Ethan, that was great. So Ethan built what looked like a blower door from, well, I don't know if you can call it a fan, a blower door fan. It's not a door, it's a fan. With a gable end fan like you'd use to ventilate what looked like an ag building or something. And he put a speed controller on there, and it looked like a pretty basic setup. It looked like he used a half a dozen different leftover materials to build the frame, which I thought was kind of fun. But it did look a little heavy. This comes from Henry. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I've been listening to the FHB podcast for quite a while now. Thank you, and please continue your great work. Congratulations, Patrick, on your recently purchased generator and transfer switch. I'm no pro at this, but this is food for thought. I've been working in commercial buildings now in New York City for over 10 years. One thing is for sure is we run our generators once a month just to keep things ready for the little one or the big one. We run the generator and put on a fake load representing the building needing power. I bought a Honda 7000 IE and transfer switch. Was not cheap, but it's very quiet. I asked the guy who services our generator how I can maintain it and extend its lifespan. He suggested to run it once in a while and connect it to a hairdryer or anything so it can put out power so that the generator can do some type of work. Change the oil and just to do the normal service described in the manual. If you have an electric start, a trickle charger helps to keep the battery ready at a moment's notice. And just don't store it away in the shed and expect it to work when the day comes. It just might lock up on you, and that is a whole other situation you will be in. Good luck, and please continue your great work. Henry. There you go.
So do you have a schedule in place now for testing yours on a regular basis, Patrick?
Oh my God, Rob. So I was thinking of putting like a schedule and Outlook to run this kind of thing. It's just a big freaking hassle. The thing weighs hundreds of pounds. You got to drag it outside. You got to put some gas in it. I like to run the gas out of it when I'm done using it, right? So it doesn't have bad gas sitting in it. So it's a hassle. I mean, I will do it, but...
Yeah, you definitely want to run the gas out of it, because if there's any nowadays that with the alcohol in the gas, if there's any sitting in that carburetor, that's usually one of the main things that messes these things up and makes them not ready to go when you need them next.
Brian, do you still have your motorcycle?
I don't.
So you don't have to worry about this kind of crap anymore?
Nope. I have no house in one car. That's it. Life's pretty simple compared to a few years ago when it comes to the maintenance in my life.
I bet.
Yeah.
We heard from Brad in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hey, pod people. I just listened to the Pro Talk podcast with fella Minnesotan Peter Kuljic. Great show, but I feel compelled to comment about the weather comments, discussing weather as a favorite pastime at our igloo parties. I think there is some intrigue in the FHB offices about the weather here in Minnesota, and specifically the Twin Cities. Patrick, I think you should come out and visit us a few times to dispel some of the hyperbole I've been hearing on the podcast and check out the building scene here. Yes, as Peter says, it gets cold, but we don't live in temperatures below zero very often. We have 23 days a year that dip below zero, but it rarely stays that way for very long. Sometimes just a few hours. I also think Steve from Minnetonka got a little carried away about the heat and humidity here in his feedback in episode 269. I also checked on those Lake Superior surface temperatures, which in late summer reach around 60, not 36. Come on, guys. Sure, we've had some hot ones, maybe a string of them, but statistically, we only exceed 90 degrees 11 days per year. Maybe this will help a little. Statistical average high-low temps in January are 9 lows and 24 highs, rising to 66 lows and 85 high in July. Sure, there are anomalies, but in reality, we Minnesotans like to lie about our weather in both directions just to keep the riffraff out. As one who grew up in Central Florida, I wouldn't trade our climate, people, or way of life for anywhere else. But forget I said that. Y'all stay where you are. Yeah, see, 9 degrees in January, that's balmy. Yeah, that's yeah. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about. Have you been to Minnesota, Brian?
I've been to the Twin Cities.
What'd you think?
It was cold.
Were you there in June?
I think that's the only place in Minnesota I've been is the Twin Cities, and it's been for work. And we have a couple of big. Well, I'm not sure. I've been into the Twin Cities and then driven out of the area to visit folks at Marvin and the folks at Anderson Windows. They're both in proximity to Minneapolis, and that was always for ad sales meetings. And what I liked about going to the Twin Cities for ad sales meetings was that the ad sales rep at the time was a baseball fan, so he always took me to a baseball game. And it's a great downtown stadium.
Cool.
So I love the folks at Marvin and Anderson Windows. And someone else was out there too. I can't think who it was. Not a window manufacturer, but yeah, they're great. But the baseball games were really what
what did it
got me to go on those trips.
Well, Brad, I have no doubt that the people are very sweet in Minnesota. You're not going to convince me that the climate is great. Should we get to some questions?
Sure.
Do it.
So Andrew wrote in. He says, hello, Fine Homebuilding crew. First, I want to say thank you for putting on this awesome podcast. I listen to it religiously on Fridays as soon as I get up. A little backstory. My wife and I just bought our first home in St. Paul, Minnesota. Congratulations, Andrew. Not sure what the style is, but it was built in 1939. It's got tons of projects I'm excited to address. We talked about replacing the windows, but we love the look of the wooden windows, so our first major project will be replacing a few cracked panes and then reglazing almost all of the windows. With winter approaching quickly, I'm getting nervous about leaving a giant hole in my house and using only the storm windows to block nature. I've been researching the process for refinishing the windows and was wondering if someone with more knowledge could review my process and give me any hints or tips for doing it properly or point out steps that I'm missing. See the steps below. I'm not going to read Andrew's 20-point plan for reglazing his windows, but given he has a 20-point plan, it is a perfect project for you, Andrew. He's ready, right?
Yeah, I'd say everything on that list looks like he's done his homework.
I would make one suggestion, and that is to read the article that we published a couple years ago from Ben Brunick. And if you're doing a house worth of windows, to consider whatever step his heat gun for removing paint is, to consider replacing that with a homemade steam box. Because I got to witness Ben work on restoring his windows, same situation, and he made a very simple steam box with some foil-faced rigid foam and a gas burner and water tank, and it just made the work really kind of go very smooth, very easily of removing that paint. The paint comes off at such an easy degree that you need to actually be careful not to harm the wood because that's been softened up too as you're removing the paint, which uses that steam box. And I've tried heat guns before, and I've always felt like they were kind of painfully slow.
It's slow
to use. Yeah. So I'd suggest looking at that article, consider making one of these steam boxes. And then the other thing he didn't mention, so I want to mention it, or if he did mention it, I didn't see it, is just lead paint safety.
Yeah.
Those windows probably have some lead paint on them on one layer or another. And so just, take the necessary precautions. If you are heating or steaming, wear the right respirator. If you're scraping and chips are flying everywhere, make sure you've covered the area with plastic and, dispose of it properly, all that kind of stuff.
Anyone who does this for any an amount of windows, you have to build up a station to do this because the work is slow and you need to be comfortable and you need to have all your stuff there. And as Brian suggests, you need to keep your chips contained so you don't poison your family. So
Ben also used sort of an easel setup, which was really nice for doing the glazing and whatnot, putting the sash on that and having it sort of in a vertical position or almost vertical position to work on really made the work, he put it in a nice position to do the work. So and again, if you're doing a whole house worth of windows, taking the time to create that station, to build the steam box, to create an easel type setup for doing the work, I think is time well spent.
Yeah. There's 2 points. One, Brian, you mentioned the lead safety. If you go to our homepage, there's our recently published painting guide, which has all of our videos and articles on painting, and the window articles you talked about and our lead safety articles are all in that painting guide.
I want to plug our web membership. We don't do this too often, but there is a ton of material on restoring sash and fine home building. It is just a perfect content area for us because, we value saving old houses and the historic importance of those windows is very important. And honestly, it's not an expensive thing to do, but it is labor intensive. So you want to learn all you can about it so you don't have to do it again in a few years, right?
Yeah. One thing he asked about, or you guys mentioned is he doesn't want to have a hole in his house in the wintertime. I mean, it looks like most of the windows on his house are similar sized windows. He could probably take some scraps of wood and some sheet plastic or some plexiglass.
Or even just a piece of plywood, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I figure you don't want a big dark hole in covered up in your house.
Do you think it matters in Minnesota in winter?
You mean it's dark there anyway?
Brad's going to come and beat me up.
And one more question he had, I don't know if you're going to get to it, is what do you think about refinishing single pane windows as opposed to putting double glazed windows in? I've mentioned this before. There's a company in Connecticut called Buy Glass of Connecticut. Yeah, Buy Glass of Connecticut. And they actually do this sort of hybrid job where they take your old sashes and they have a very refined process of removing the glass, routing out the muttons and the sashes to allow for double pane. They even have their own proprietary weighting systems because now that the sash is going to be heavier, you have to deal with the fact that it won't work with the old weights that they would have had.
And you're going to deprive Andrew of all the joy of scraping dozens of window sash and reglazing them.
I'm just answering his question.
Okay. This is totally worth doing, Andrew. And this is a great project for, I would say, get your wife involved. This is from Greg in Corte Madera, California. Do you think I said that right?
Sounded good.
Hi, guys. Really enjoying the podcast and learning so much, especially about the rigors of tap dancing floors. Do you know what that's in reference to, Brian?
I assume it's Kylie. Kylie. I don't remember it being on the show, but.
Last August, I repaired the outdoor stairs for some friends in Berkeley. It's an old Victorian, and the stairs cover an enclosed space below that has a concrete slab floor and wood walls, which are common walls to the laundry/room basement. It's a small rental unit of a couple hundred square feet. The previous stair treads were about 20 years old and had suffered rot from the treads being ever so slightly inclined toward the risers, perhaps a result of age or shifting stringers or all of the things that old houses face. They also butted into the risers instead of the risers landing on the treads, so water just got into the joint. The stairs come from an elevated covered walkway in the rear of the house that lead down the back garden. The stairs themselves are uncovered from the upper landing to the ground. I removed all the treads and risers. The underlying PT risers were still stringers were still serviceable. I shorted the connection to the house and added some mid-stringer supports. I purchased new kiln-dry Douglas fir treads from the local lumberyard and followed their recommendations of 2 coats of primer pre-installation on all sides of the treads. During installation, I made sure there was a degree of tilt so the away from the risers to promote proper drainage. All joints between all the pieces were caulked with big stretch prior to the pieces being placed to ensure that the joint was well sealed. Nail holes were primed, puttied, and then primed again. I thought I was taking every step to make these stairs last. This was all done prior to the house getting painted. The stair treads were painted a kind of maroon color that one would expect to see on a Victorian. I got a call from my friends this fall that the treads are holding water. Upon visiting, the treads are cupping and pulling away. I'm stumped at what could be happening. My first thought was that this is a combination of moisture from the space below and the summer sun baking the exposed part of the tread and shrinking that side. I thought I had anticipated and prevented the moisture ingress with 2 solid coats of primer. The previous treads were painted the same color and lasted almost 20 years and were only painted on the upper surface. So I'm really puzzled. I'm about to go fix them before it starts raining again, hopefully, but I don't want to repeat any mistakes and have to go do this again next year. What are your thoughts? The local lumberyard at first thought the same causes as I had, but found it strange that they would warp so much. Looking forward to some ideas. Should I replace the treads with marine plywood? But the original treads were solid timber, so I don't want to go down that route. Oh my goodness. Okay. Rob, you go first.
Me go first. Okay. Well, I mean, he's got some good guesses there. I mean, the combination of the hot sun on the top and the moist concrete floor below is one thing. It could also be about grain direction on those planks. You know, the whole debate whether you do bark side up or down when you do deck boards.
So this is kind of confusing to me, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but he said he has vertical grain dug fir treads, so it doesn't move that way. No, that's right.
It shouldn't move that way. Oh, yeah. I didn't catch that.
So I wonder if he really has vertical grain treads. I think that would be expensive, and you know you might be able to get that, especially in California. But I wonder.
Yeah. I mean, it could be needs a little bit more pitch, and it could be he needs some sort of vapor retarder underneath those steps, perhaps.
Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think his guesses about why the cupping is happening are probably right on. I mean, I don't know other reasons why cupping happenings like that, except for, you know, uneven drying from the bottom and the top of the piece of wood. Trying a vapor barrier underneath, if that's possible in his situation, is my work.
So you're thinking plastic? Just put plastic on the concrete?
I would think maybe tar paper or some other vapor retarder as opposed to a full vapor barrier, right?
I don't know if it matters so much. I mean, you're really, in an outdoor application like this, you're just trying to stop moisture movement. So depending on what the situation is, he could decide on that. But
So would you put that on the underside of the stringers or on top of the concrete slab that's below them?
Well, people often do it right on the ground with below grade decks. It sounds like he has concrete underneath here. So, I mean, also, you know, if he didn't have concrete, you know, people also use beds of gravel to slow upward vapor movement from the ground as you go from, you know, soil to bigger and bigger types of gravel. You create a situation where you slow, not eloquently describing the science, but you create a situation where you slow the upward vapor migration. So that can work too. So there's a lot of possibilities from sheet plastic to gravel to slowing that upward vapor movement. You know, maybe even he can just use more airflow underneath the stairs if that's a possibility for him. Then
I think it's
option. another option, depending on what these treads are, and especially if they're big treads, like if they're like full depth treads, which sometimes aren't the case with outdoor stairs, maybe relief cuts in the bottoms of the treads.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that actually that was one of the first things I thought was like maybe the tops of the risers should have slits in them to let some air through.
I was kind of concerned about what you said. He caulked all the joints. Like I would want
Sure.
some movement so that moisture coming from the concrete can actually get through the staircase and not be trapped on the bottom side of all the wood parts of it. Yeah. And of course, he's in California, so the top side is bacon, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what this was in reference to, but I remember a carpenter once telling me that, and I believe it was for outdoor deck building content, but I don't remember if it was steps or not, but that he uses a little bit oversized pilot holes, and he finds that allowing the wood to move a little bit for his fasteners, he finds that allowing the wood to move a little bit prevents cupping. As opposed to trying to really lock it down, sort of like you would do if you were installing a wood countertop or something like that. You create elongated holes to allow a little bit of movement. So I don't know if that would work in a situation like this or be helpful with cupping, but I'm pretty sure I remember at least hearing that advice once over the years.
Yeah.
I would be tempted to cut the treads in half and make them half as wide. Then you're going to get a little airflow, and it's also going to, reduce the amount of cup.
The thing is, if it's a storage space underneath, I think you'd want to do all that on the risers, not on the treads themselves, So you're not getting any water coming down in through the treads into the space. So it seems like either letting some air move from that space to the outside, or like Brian was saying, deal with the moisture before it even gets into the space.
Brian, you've made the point in past episodes that the vapor permeability of paint matters an awful lot. So if, for example, he's using a latex primer on the bottom side of the treads without an oil-based top coat, and if he's done latex primer on the top side of the treads with an oil-based material, latex products are much more vapor permeable, so it could be getting into the tread and not going anywhere, right? Couldn't it be?
I thought of that too, because he mentioned the priming all the sides and of the treads, and that's important, But I think that's unless you're specifying a vapor impermeable paint, that's important to keep water from actually getting into the grain in its liquid form, but it's not going to necessarily prevent, vapor from getting into the treads if it's a more vapor open paint. So he could look and try to specify something that's more, try to use something that's more vapor closed.
Greg, I don't know if any of that was helpful, except that it seemed like you did a great job. I would be tempted also, if I didn't cut the treads in half to make them half as wide, would be to just take one of them, temporarily remove it, flip it over, and see what happens, just as an experiment. And see what happens. You could even try doing a couple different things, like improving the ventilation by giving some space between the riser and the tread before you did them all, to see if the conditions changed. What do you guys think? Is that science or is that bogus?
Seems like a good idea.
Try.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point though, Patrick. It's if you have the option, it's not a bad idea to do some smaller experiments before you go ahead and redo this whole job and find that your fix doesn't work.
I try not to make my fixes not work. I wish I could say it was always successful. This comes from Bob in Winchester, Massachusetts. Thanks for the show for the whole team. I enjoy each and every podcast. I've been meaning to ask this question every time I take a lukewarm shower. I have a gas boiler that heats the water in our 60-gallon Superstore tank. I noticed that every time there's a temperature swing outside of 15 degrees, our shower water goes cold. I need to then readjust the dial on the thermometer on the storage tank to call for hotter water the next time the boiler fires. Meanwhile, I'm stuck with a lukewarm water for my showers. Am I doomed to have this happen every change of season? The confusing part about this is when we get a 1 or 2 day January thaw and my water gets lukewarm for a few days because the boiler won't heat the water enough. Is the outdoor temperature messing with my thermometer, or is the temperature of the street water coming into the house what's different? I wish I had an app to remotely control and monitor the temperature swings rather than reacting to this after my wife yells, "The water is cold." Thanks, Bob.
So he sounds like he's got an outdoor temperature sensor on his thermostat for his.
Rob, you're
boiler?
a freaking genius, because that's exactly what I thought, but he doesn't.
No. No.
Yeah, no. So I don't know what's going on here. I think that
it just seems to me that if his water heater is working properly, so heating water to the temperature that he has it set at, that it's a matter of the mix of hot and cold water before it gets to the shower, right?
Do you think?
I mean, what else could it be?
Well, that's a good observation. I don't know what it could be. I really don't. This is a very odd behavior. And he's got 60 freaking gallons of hot water. How can it be lukewarm? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, we do an awful lot of these answers based on assumptions of existing conditions. This is one I don't know if we have enough information here.
Boy, we haven't fallen back on that response in a long time. Well, so here's what we do when we don't know. We need a listener to weigh in on this. And if Mike Lombardi, if you're listening out there, I hope you can weigh in. I bet you know exactly what's going on here. I asked Bob for a little more detail, and it doesn't happen when the temperature gets colder. It happens when the temperature gets warmer. So for whatever reason, his boiler is not running when it realizes that the outdoor temperature is rising. And like I said, I was sure it had an outdoor sensor that was set up incorrectly, right? But he says he declined that. Go ahead.
Could he be preheating his water?
Yeah, so you know what, I didn't catch that. So basically, you know, like my old oil boiler when I moved into my house had one of those coils in the top.
That's what he's got.
Yeah, so it wasn't a true indirect hot water heater, which had its own separate separate loop in the heat system. It's just taking hot water off the boiler. So that makes sense. So basically, his boiler isn't hot, and he's relying on too much of the heat from that. It makes me wonder if does that produce all of his hot water?
Yeah, I think so. So he's got a indirect tank on the boiler that then feeds this hot water to this storage tank.
Yeah, but if it was a true indirect hot water heater, it would fire up when it called for hot water. Right. But if it's just a coil on the boiler, it's only just taking residual heat from the boiler, so it's not actually producing hot water directly. Maybe that's the case. Maybe he doesn't have a functioning hot water heater.
Yes, I had that situation in my last house. So we preheated the water with the boiler, and then it went to an electric water heater that was meant to maintain the set temperature. Mm-hmm. And we would have hotter water, I think, at times when we were heating the house, because if we took a shower, or used hot water, when that preheated water got to the electric water heater before it actually cooled to the set temperature.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's something in that equation that is going on, and because that's the opposite of what you would think would happen, right? You would think that he'd have colder water when it was colder outside. And then that could have to do with what I mentioned before, which could be the cold water temperature somehow getting chilled.
But yeah, so basically his coil is not hot enough when it's warm outside because his boiler isn't running as much. Right. So basically his water heater isn't picking up the slack for some reason, or he doesn't have a full water heater.
Bob told me that he has a Takeo controller for his boiler, right? He's got a couple zones. And we've talked in the past on the show about some companies are really good about customer service and helping people diagnose their problems. Takeo, I've heard, is one of them. So, call them and ask them how you can set up that controller to better to have more consistent hot water temperatures. And I bet they have a pretty easy fix. This is from Alex in Ohio. Hi, guys. Love the show. I'm still making my way through the podcast backlog, but I'm not a builder by trade, so I'd ask your thoughts on my situation. I'm looking to turn my detached 2-car garage into a functional workshop for woodworking. My garage is made of concrete block with an overhead door, open ceilings, and bare concrete slab. The block has exterior paint but is bare inside. As a first step, I'm looking to frame in the wall so I can run electric lights, dust collection, and easily hang stuff on the walls. It seems like a long way off, but I'd like to keep my options open for insulating and heating the shop during the Ohio winter. I've been listening to the show for a while, but I'm still not sure what I need to do about moisture in the walls. The block is porous and will allow moisture transfer. From what I understand, this should be fine as long as I keep a vapor retarder on the warm side of the framed wall. Any moisture that gets between the vapor retarder and the block would be able to dry out back through the block. However, the outside of the garage has been painted by the previous owners. I'm not sure what this does to the ability of the block to either let moisture in or let moisture out. I found an article at Building Science Corporation which suggests that exterior insulation would be great for this situation. However, due to the garage being immediately on the property line, this isn't really a workable solution. Friends have suggested I double down on preventing moisture exchange through the block with dry lock or another vapor barrier, but this seems counter to everything I've learned from FHB. I don't want moisture to get trapped within the wall and cause the new wall to rot. I'm not even planning to insulate immediately, but I don't want to make any mistakes at this stage that requires I rebuild the wall when I do. Let me know if you need any more detail. Thanks, Alex. Alex said he lives in Columbus. You know, Ohio has a pretty varied climate, so Columbus is one of the warmer parts.
So, you know, his concern about, like, Building Science Corporation has some great information about masonry, solid masonry walls and insulating them. And one of the biggest concerns with like a brick or a stone historic building where you don't want to put insulation and siding on the outside is don't over insulate, because you can get frost damage in the winter time if your wall is getting wet from the outside and not drying and not getting enough heat to prevent that frost damage. But since this is not some historic building that he's concerned about, I think he could still do vapor retarder and some insulation on the inside of the block wall. He might just want to just make sure that the outside of the wall isn't getting it as wet. I mean, he could perhaps add some siding and flashing to the outside wall. Maybe.
He can't.
No, he can't?
He's right on the property line.
Oh, okay. Well,
I've never heard that concern with block. That I've heard that concern with brick, but you know, structural brick buildings, but I've never heard it with block buildings.
Okay, so then it's basically probably not a huge concern.
I don't think here's my opinion on this is that I don't think he has to worry too much about anything, and here's why. For one thing, block walls can get wet and stay wet. Block walls don't need to dry. So the block wall itself getting wet isn't a concern. You know, if he's concerned about his wood framing, that's a different thing. But masonry walls,
they don't care.
They can get wet and stay wet. That's what mass walls are meant to do. That's the difference between a mass wall and a wood framed wall with water management, on the outside, is that these blocks can get wet and stay wet. The other reason I don't think he has to be too concerned is because this is going to be used as a shop.
No moisture loading on the inside,
there's not
right?
going to be tons of moisture loading, and it's going to have lots of energy flowing through the building with an overhead door. Right. This isn't the same as building a house that's going to be very, very tight, very controlled system. And so what I would suggest in his case is that he insulate the block before he built his interior walls, and he insulate
with foam, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you'll have a little bit of vapor control, between at the front of the block wall, but it'll separate your block wall that can get wet and can hold water and can dry to when the timing is right from his wood framed wall that he wants to keep in a conditioned space. So it's almost the same thing as adding exterior insulation to his wood framed wall. So put rigid foam on the block wall first, then build your stud walls inside that. You have a better insulation package because you've reduced the thermal bridging. And if you want to add even more insulation inside your stud walls, you can. And if you don't want to, because you're just trying to warm this place up to do some work on the weekends or at night when you get home from work, don't worry about it. It's a shop space, not a living space.
I can tell you from my own experience in my outbuilding shop, air management, having a good air barrier is way more important than the amount of insulation, because honestly, you just don't use the space that much that the insulation matters. You need to heat the air when you're out there working. You're probably not going to be heating the space all the time. And, overhead doors are notoriously leaky. So, maybe you want to swap out the overhead door for a pair of carriage doors. I would work on making a good air barrier before I really worry too much about insulating. The ceilings of garages are often extremely leaky too, or even open to the rafters. So you need an air barrier up there to keep the heated air you're making when you're working in the shop inside the space.
Yeah.
If you go ahead, Rob.
No, I was going to say, if you're going to do what Brian suggested with just do some rigid insulation on the block wall, I don't even know if even need to frame out any walls inside there. You might just want some furring strips or studs on the flat, just something to fasten to if you're running ductwork or hanging things on the walls. You obviously have to put something in, like drywall or something in as for fire safety if you're doing foam on the on there, but you don't probably need full wall cavities. If you're
that's a great point, and especially because in a situation like this, like surface mounted electrical is actually a nice thing to have, because you can move it around over time as you change your shop and need the receptacles in different places and whatnot. So locking your electric into the stud wall just seems like it might be might just cause a headache down the road.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I made that mistake in my barn. I ran all kinds of wires where I had plans to use the barn in the past, and now I'm kind of wishing I just done surface mounted boxes or just if it's a workshop, run some of those nice heavy duty power strips that you just screw to the bottom of a workbench and just have a couple of plugs in strategic locations mounted to the wall.
Good idea.
And the last thing I'll add to this discussion, in this, it doesn't change, my thoughts about his particular situation, but variable perm vapor retarders are a great solution in situations like this, where maybe you're remodeling and you're unsure about permeability of the exterior. Variable perm materials on the inside can give you that sort of vapor control that you want in the heating season, give you a little bit of drying in the cooling season or the summertime, and they can also be installed as your air barrier. So they're a nice sort of middle of the road solution.
So what are some examples of those products that you're talking about, Brian?
Well, the two that I'm most familiar with are the CertainTeed has one called Membrane, which you can buy as a membrane, and you can also buy, I believe you can buy it on bats, right? You can buy fiberglass bats with that membrane product as the facing.
I've heard that.
And in other craft-based bats, the craft facing is a vapor variable permeance vapor retarder. But you have to look at which ones you're getting and make sure that that's what you're getting. And then the product that a lot of the high performance builders are using is the Intello Plus membrane from Proclima, which is meant to be used as a variable perm vapor retarder and an air barrier.
Folks are going to be surprised at how much this stuff costs, though, if they're comparing it to other things, right, Brian?
If they're comparing it to plastic sheeting, but I think we know that plastic sheeting in all but the coldest climates is a pretty bad idea in houses. And we mean extremely cold climates. There's not many of them in
below the Canadian border. Yeah.
Yeah. We're talking like super northern New England and the super northern Midwest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would tell Alex too that, he's in a pretty moderate climate, Columbus, Ohio. So, you could really over insulate this space that you're going to be using intermittently, right? When I was talking about a heating strategy for my barn, Martin Holliday pointed out to me, he's like, Patrick, how much are you really going to be using this? And of course, this was pre-COVID. And I was like, well, maybe 10, 20 hours a week. He's like, that's not enough to worry about how much, insulating you're doing, right, or how much you're spending on. You don't want to spend a ton of money on a heating plant. You're just not going to use it that much. And he's totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, out in my barn, I take one of those little ceramic heaters out there, and as long as the doors are sealed up tight, in 20 minutes, that thing gets the room warm enough for me to work on, and I'm not going to keep it running when I'm not there. So
I think like you said, Patrick, do a great job air sealing. Rigid foam, it makes that work easy. At least on the walls, because you can use a little bit of sealant and a little bit of tape and get it done on the walls. So do a great job air sealing. If the overhead door is old, upgrade it, because that's going to be a huge hole in your garage. And so put the best thing in there that you can. Yeah. And get something that, probably with heating, probably the most important thing is that you can bring it up to a comfortable temperature quickly. but not that you need to, you need to worry about like, the costs of heating over the long haul.
I love having a wood stove in the barn, and since March, right, or February, I've been using it to heat the space, and it's kind of fun for starters. And if you have a woodworking hobby, there's always crap to burn.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, one other point on this guy's project. It's really very similar to a lot of ways people insulate basements, what he's trying to do. In fact, so Andy Engel has that article from a bunch of years ago about doing a continuous foam insulation in a basement. And then Justin, a couple of years ago, did a video series with a few good points. And then you could probably pick up some really good details in both of those. And we'll put those in the notes.
Cool. So, Brian, can you do me a favor and talk a little bit about our virtual summit that's coming up?
Oh, yeah, sure. So as many listeners probably remember, last year we had the first ever Fine Homebuilding Summit. We got together for 3 days in Massachusetts and pulled together a whole bunch of home building
luminaries.
Luminaries, architects and engineers and builders and remodelers. And we had a 3-day in-person educational event. And, frankly, and I wasn't involved. I'm certainly not patting myself on the back because I had nothing to do with planning the summit. All I did was show up there. But it was a great event. It was one of the best, home building events that I feel like I've ever been to in terms of the education, the accessibility to the experts, and the networking that was able to happen there. And so obviously we can't do a live event this year, and that's sad because we all enjoyed it so much and we'd like to see everyone again. But we did put together a pretty awesome lineup again of professionals to do a virtual summit. It will be happening later in October, the 26th it begins. It's 4 nights. And each night we will have a keynote address. And then we'll have a couple of, 3 breakout sessions. So after the keynote address, attendees will be able to just choose whose presentation they go see from 3 different professionals. And then at the end of the night, we're bringing everyone together for a roundtable that will be moderated by a Fine Homebuilding editor. It will be on a platform called Big Marker, which is think of a Zoom webinar, but a little bit more functionality. And the reason I mention that is because even though we're not live, there will still be a lot of opportunity for attendees to participate. We'll have Q&As, we'll have a chat box. So there will be that kind of those kind of opportunities there. And so we're going to do our best to have another great summit this year, even if it's virtual. And then, fingers crossed that, it won't be too long till we can get back to having an in-person summit again.
Any word on who will be presenting there, Brian? Do we have the lineup yet?
We do have a lineup, and I believe it's now live on our website. Is that right, Rob?
That is correct. In fact, you can go register now. I'm going to go take a quick look.
It's a really long URL, Rob. So I think we should just
all you really need to do is do finehomebuilding.com/summit, and that will take you right to the landing page. There's a button right there to register, or you can scroll down to see all of the course listings, the listings of all the speakers. This year we've got Peter Yost, we've got Michael Maines, Jordan Goldman, Mike Gerton, Ben Bogey, Dan Colbert, Marianne Casado, Sonia Barantes, Jack Staub, Chris Magwood, Kota, how do you say his last name? Ueno. Gary Klein, Christine Williamson, and Jake Bruton. And one point I do want to make
That's everyone.
Everyone.
Allison Bales has joined. Ted Benson has joined. So
that's awesome.
Like we really got, we really have a great lineup again.
That's awesome.
And the one point I want to make is that, everybody's been doing webinars, including us lately, and people are getting used to sort of seeing this kind of stuff everywhere. But we're going to do our best to bridge the gap between what people expect from a typical webinar and and the sort of wonderful experience people had in person at last year's summit. So there's the platform that we're doing on isn't like a simple Zoom call. It's a little bit more robust and interactive than that. So we're going to do our best to give people that same experience that they loved last year at the summit.
What I think is cool about this is 2 things. One, it's going to be more affordable for people, right? And number 2 is no matter where you are in the country, this is going to be easy to attend compared to making your way to Massachusetts to come to the live event, which admittedly was a freaking one of the highlights of my life, I must say. But this is going to give you a chance to see this without having to make your way to Massachusetts, when we're all busy, right?
For sure. That's the benefit of doing this, this virtual summit. So it can be more inclusive to people who aren't able to travel for it.
Well, I got to share something with you guys. This came from one of our listeners, and he sent me a photograph. I think it's fake. This mechanical room for this real estate listing in the Toronto area. And I thought it was fake too. Rob, did you follow the link?
No, I didn't. No.
So if you follow the link, it's for a real estate listing. And this is one of the photographs in this otherwise pretty normal looking house. But I'll try to explain it. But it looked like it was a half a dozen water heaters connected with like 600 valves and pumps. So I'll put that photograph on the podcast page.
There's even a cordless drill attached to some sort of a pump. I don't know what the heck that is. It's like tie wrapped to the wall, and I just can't believe it.
It's battery backup.
It looks I don't know. It looks like a Where's Waldo kind of picture. Like you have to try to find the actual real valve in the picture.
This is some of the copy that goes with the real estate listing. This is the best part here. Okay. The closing date is dependent on the estate receiving a certificate of appointment. Due to the complexity of the property and the equipment, this property is being sold as is. Interested buyers are encouraged to visit the property and do their own due diligence. I would say, don't buy it.
Oh, come on. You can just gut that room and start from scratch.
You guys got to look at this photograph. It's hilarious. And I was very skeptical, Rob, that it was real, but the real estate agent listing made me think it is indeed real.
Well, we encourage people every time to go to our finehomebuilding.com/podcast, podcast section of the website to see all the pictures that you can't see when you're listening on the air. This is definitely one reason to go.
Agreed.
But I know that's your end note, but I just wanted to mention something. I've been emailing back and forth with this guy, Joel, up in Canada. He's kind of he seems like the kind of guy who just takes on whatever project that he wants to. And he's got this beautiful kind of barn style house. And he's always sending me pictures of projects. And he sends me emails every now and then with funny little anecdotes about stuff that's going on. And I got to read this one line in this email to you. He says, "My Japanese gardener was just making a sandwich for tomorrow's lunch and asked if both pieces needed to be buttered. I know. It's only been 23 years as of Sunday. I said, of course, it's a moisture barrier. She said, I should let Fine Homebuilding know. Brilliant."
Oh, that's awesome. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Brian, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions and used car offers to the FHB podcast at taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Thanks so much, folks, for listening. Stay safe and happy building.